Hello, hello. Glad you are watching today. We are going to be in the Book of Deuteronomy today, which is the last of the first 5 books of the Bible, which form a set called the Torah. Torah is a Hebrew word which means law or teaching, and these first 5 books of the Bible were really foundational for ancient Israel. Not only did they contain God's laws, but they also told the origin story of the people of Israel. Now, I know that a lot of people think that Deuteronomy is just a bunch of laws, but I don't think that's a fair way to frame it. There are a bunch of laws, but Deuteronomy actually has a number of stories in it, and the law portions are often more poetic than you might expect. So don't let the book intimidate you. I love Deuteronomy. Now, as far as I can remember, we haven't talked about Sabbath for any of these Better News Daily videos. So today is going to be a great day to do that because one of the 3 key passages about Sabbath comes from this book. Now, if you attended the full Better News presentations earlier this year, this is going to sound familiar to you, but I think that it's worth hearing twice. So Sabbath is a word that comes from the Hebrew word Shabbat, which just means to rest or to stop. And that's what Sabbath is. It's an invitation to just stop, to pump the brakes on our minds and our bodies and just rest in God. So I mentioned that there were 3 key passages about Sabbath in the Bible. The first is at creation, of course, where God blesses the 7th day and rests on it. The second key passage is in Exodus chapter 20, which is the 10 Commandments. In fact, let's just refresh on that commandment real quick. This is starting in verse 8 of chapter 20. Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days shall you labor and do all your work, but the 7th day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea and all that is in them, but he rested on the 7th day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. So the command is to remember the Sabbath day by setting it apart, by not working. Why? Because of creation. God rested on the 7th day. Now let's get to Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy is a really strange word. It comes from 2 Greek words that were smushed together. Deutero, meaning second, and nomos, meaning law. It's the second law. Why is there a second law? Well, if you remember in the story, the people of Israel wander around in the wilderness for 40 years before they're allowed to enter into the promised land. And what this means is that all of the older generation of Israelites would die before entering the land. And so Moses has to now give the law again, Deuteronomy, to this new generation of Israelites who maybe don't have a clear memory or any memory at all of the law being given at Sinai back in Exodus chapter 20. So in Deuteronomy chapter 5, we're going to hear the Sabbath commandment again, but there are a couple changes in wording, and I'm going to highlight them for you. Observe the Sabbath day by keeping it holy, as the Lord your God has commanded you. 6 days shall you labor, and it goes on from there. So there's the first change. In Exodus, the command was to remember the Sabbath day. Here, it's to observe. What's the difference? So this word observe is really interesting. The Hebrew word can mean to guard, preserve, to keep watch, or to protect. So if you think back to Cain and Abel, Cain kills his brother and then he flees, and God asks Cain where his brother is. And Cain replies, "Am I my brother's keeper?" Keeper is the same root word as the command to observe. When someone keeps a covenant, it's the same word. You guard your fidelity towards the covenant agreement. So here, the Israelites aren't told to just remember the Sabbath day, to bring it to mind so that they don't forget it. They're told to guard it, to protect it, to put barbed wire around it so that it doesn't get infringed upon. Hang on to this for later. We'll come back to that idea. Everything else in the command is the same, except at the end. Remember that you were slaves in Egypt, and that the Lord your God brought you out of there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore, the Lord your God has commanded you to observe the Sabbath. So the second key difference here is the reason for Sabbath. In the first command, it was because of creation, right? But here, it's to remember that God delivered you. You were slaves, and God freed you. Therefore, guard the Sabbath day. The second time that God gives this command, he frames it as a way for the people to resist going back to Egypt. Not just physically, but mentally and spiritually as well. God has delivered them from bondage, and Sabbath is a way to make sure that they don't go back. And similarly, you and I have been delivered from bondage at the cross. And Sabbath is a way to push back against the struggle to do and work and achieve in order to find value and meaning in life. When I talked about Sabbath for Better News, I said that Sabbath is all about three things that sound really similar: resting, resetting, and resisting. If you want to hear about the first two, listen to the full presentation that I did. In fact, I'll link it in the video description below. But Deuteronomy is focused on this last one, resisting. This weekly period of rest can be hard to keep. So part of being able to truly Sabbath involves resisting whatever threatens this block of time. Remember the wording of the command in Deuteronomy. Observe the Sabbath day. Guard it. You want to protect the day from becoming like any other day. And you want to protect it from just becoming a drab, lifeless display of religious piety. Either extreme misses the joy and renewal that God intended Sabbath to have. Do you recognize this picture? It's Central Park, the 800-acre public park in the heart of Manhattan. There's lots of research about the importance of this particular slab of green in the middle of New York City. There are huge ecological benefits to Central Park. Air pollution is drastically lowered by the natural wildlife in the park. In fact, many refer to Central Park as the lungs of New York City. Animals who are native to this area are given a home where they can live. Birds are given a space to stop during their migration patterns. It's also a place where people can escape the city, a rectangle where the chaos and rush of urbanization hasn't intruded. A public park has huge benefits for a city. Here's why I show you this. What Central Park is to New York City, Sabbath is to time. It's a breath of fresh air in the suffocating pace of urban culture. It's a sacred space that affects the atmosphere of every day that it surrounds. Walter Brueggemann says it like this: people who keep Sabbath live all 7 days differently. See, at first, Sabbath will just reshape one day of your week, but soon it will begin to affect the other 6. You need Sabbath just as much as New York City needs Central Park. Now, look again at this picture. Does it surprise you that the boundaries around this park are so well defined? I mean, it surprises me. I'd think by now that the boundaries would shrink, that more skyscrapers and roads would bleed into the boundaries little by little. But do you know why Central Park hasn't shrunk? It's because there are activists and organizations who fight for it. The urbanization and real estate threaten this space every single day, but there are people and organizations who make it their work to protect this space, to file legislation and city codes that keep this little paradise from being infringed upon. And it's no different with how we handle our time. In our pace and culture, Sabbath is not natural. It won't happen by accident. If you decide to set aside this time, other things will infringe upon it. And the only way to protect this space is to fight for it, to resist whatever threatens it. And this might be really hard. I love what A.J. Swoboda writes. The truth remains that Sabbath will be challenging for anyone to live out in our busy, frenetic world. Sabbath goes against the very structure and system of the world we have constructed. Sabbath then becomes a kind of resistance to that world. Such resistance must be characterized as overwhelmingly good. In other words, if the Sabbath is hard, then we are doing it right. It is never a sign of health or godliness to be well adjusted to a sick society. Such good stuff. It leads to my question for today. How can you resist on Sabbath? Especially right now, in a world that has been in a mode of panic and uncertainty for months now, we need this weekly space of time where we recenter to the reality that is true every day of the week. God is God, and I'm not. So how can you guard this block of time each week from becoming like every other day? How can you push back against the urge to hurry and worry? Maybe you need to turn off your phone so that you can't check your email or the news. Maybe you need to plan in advance to do things that allow you to rest. That way you don't just sit around all day treating the day with boredom and resentment. What do you need to resist, to push back against? And let me challenge you one step further. Sabbath might actually be easier to practice right now. Work has maybe slowed down, your normal busy schedule has been interrupted. But make no mistake, the world is going to keep speeding up. Faster and faster until we get back to the exhausting pace that you and I call normal. So how can you prepare your Sabbath time now so that it can withstand this mounting pressure? Because if we don't guard Sabbath now, not only will that day collapse under pressure, our bodies and our minds might as well. Something for you to think about. The randomizer is going to take us to a different book of the Bible tomorrow. While you're at it, go ahead and hit subscribe to this channel so you can keep getting these in your feed every morning. The last Better News Daily for this week will be in 2 Timothy. Thank you for watching, and we will see you tomorrow.